My son and I went to Normandy for the 70th anniversary of D-Day, and while we were there we saw hundreds of them. At the time we had a classic Mini that we were doing up, and then we decided, no, time to get rid of that and buy a Jeep. We were looking at all the military sites like Millweb all over the States, the UK, Europe, everywhere, and then there was a friend of mine saw it on Done Deal about a year after we started looking, and it was over the south side of Dublin. So right in our backyard all along, but this guy was doing a clear out of his garage, and only too happy to relieve him of it. He was quite happy with the money he got for it. So we weren't looking for a project originally. We wanted one that was mechanically sound, that maybe needed cosmetic work. In the end, we had to do a full nut and bolt restoration because the engine wasn't running, the head was off it. Most of the parts for the engine came in an IKEA bag, and the body was rusted through. The axles were good, the transfer box was good, the gearbox was good, so we had a lot to start with. And with a lot of technical help from other people as well. We got the engine rebuilt first of all, got it running. Then we stripped it down completely, right down to the chassis, and it was literally a nut and bolt restoration. And it's a very, very simple design. So it was easy enough once you've taken it apart, labelled everything, to put it all back together again. It's quite basic. They were made to be repaired and fixed in the field by the soldiers with minimum tools. There's a full original toolkit with it, and that bag of tools will basically give you the opportunity to do anything you need, including pulling the hubs off the wheels, whatever you need to do. There was no record kept of where they were sent based on their chassis number. So what you are able to maybe trace it through the hood number, but there were no original hood numbers on ours. But that is a mix of several different Jeeps. Both Willys made them and Ford made them. Willys made a 360,000, and Ford, because they had greater manufacturing capacity, were drafted in as well, and they made 280,000. So afterwards, after Willys started. So that's a mix of Ford and Willys parts. So it's been rebuilt at least once before I rebuilt it, and probably numerous times. Any new mode of transport, whether it was air, sea or land, was called a Jeep. Don't know why, but it just seemed to stick with that, and Willys copyrighted it after the war. So towards the very end of the war, I think Jeep started appearing on the top of the engines, but after the war they were the ones who copyrighted it. And then of course the company went bust. It was a Willys Overland company. It was really from the time we bought it to the time we got it road registered, and it was 2 years. Now the strip down didn't take terribly long once we started, but we had it for about 8 months before we did anything with it other than get the engine rebuilt. So a little over a year probably to put it all back together. When we had the time and had the technical help to do it, because a friend of mine who has a body shop, Barry Halley and JH Auto Body, taught me how to spray paint. And so I've spray painted every single thing on that in my garage. It's quite forgiving. As you can see, it's a flat matte colour. It doesn't matter if there were drips on it. We did it up as a motor pool Jeep with numerous different parts and repainted in the field as necessary. They weren't precious about them. I mean, we've gone back over, really careful with it for the first 6 months that we had it, you know, checking it over, making sure everything was it was tight, going back and double checking things, this being the first time we'd restored anything. So, you know, we were a little bit nervous about it. But touch wood, it's all stayed together so far. One of the big things with them is they leak. They leak from the gearbox, they leak from the transfer cases, they leak everywhere. The only time it stops leaking is when it's empty. Underneath it there is a lubrication chart, and it tells you what you have to do. So every 1,000 miles, 6,000 miles, weekly, all the checks that are meant to be done. Follow that and it's quite simple. Well, most of the things, because we do so little mileage in it, only have to be done once a year. And other than topping up the radiator and checking the oil levels, which are done monthly, we don't have to do much else. So the brakes are in good order. I also added indicators to it. Being left-hand drive, they would originally have been blackout driving lights for driving in convoy. They're little LEDs, and it's been converted to 12 volt as well. I can get it jump started by somebody if I need to, or as has happened, I've jump started somebody else. It's a 2.2 litre petrol, and it's got 60 horsepower. And that's one of the reasons that Willys got the contract originally, because they had that powerful engine. So it's insured with Chubb. Whereas they were able to give it a guaranteed value, agreed value, plus more on top of that if it needed it to be repaired beyond that value. Limited mileage, obviously, but I think they allow 5,000 a year. It also includes recovery from anywhere in Europe. So you're in high two-wheel drive from the road, and then say on gravel you'd be in high four-wheel drive, and then if you're on sand or in mud, low four-wheel drive, and they all work. So yeah, there you go. Let me take the other one off and I'll switch on. That's a 6-volt Blackout drive light. That is the only thing that has not been restored on it. That's completely original. Yeah, now these are 12 volts, so they're much better than the original 6-volt. Again, a safety thing that I put in. It doesn't take away from the look of it, but from a practicality point of view, much better. You can still buy new old stock stuff, but I wouldn't be buying things like, using things like seals or stuff like that. I'll go with more modern stuff. Particularly the fuel pumps in them. They're not, the old ones wouldn't be able to handle the ethanol that's in modern fuel. So it just eats it. And there's the lubrication chart. But there are 28 grease nipples on it to be done with that grease gun. And then on the back side has the trailer. It's a generator that's on it. It produces about 9.6 volts. So it goes then through an electronic regulator, which is hidden inside the original regulator housing. Fuel pump or fuel filter on the back there. That's an oil bath air filter to trap. They use the oil to trap all the dust particles and stuff like that before feeding it in, and then the excess oil then drips into the sump. That's the oil filter, and then you got your original carburetor there. There's the Blackout drive light on it. You'd see nothing with that. Yeah, they're all called Pioneer tools, and virtually every vehicle in World War II had them, tanks included. It was rated for 5, would you believe? Now, they were a lot smaller. The average size guy would have been probably about 5'6" and a size 36 chest, 28 waist, judging by the old uniforms and stuff that I found. There are myriad ways they can be set up. And some of them, of course, had stretchers put on them. I have a machine gun mount for the back of it. Some of them had 50 or 30 caliber machine guns on them. See the 4 bolts in the middle of the floor? Goes in there. Now it would have had 3 legs. It could be swung around to fire any direction. And then that's obviously a rifle holder on the windscreen as well. And that's a rifle scabbard originally made for the cavalry, but because they had so many of them, they put them on jeeps, they put them on the motorbikes, they had them on trucks. I really love it with the windscreen down, I have to say. Absolutely, a total labour of love. And because my son and I did it together, he would never, ever let me sell it because he can't wait till he's old enough to drive it.